to the Eagle and Dove podcast. I'm your host, Natalie King, here to help you keep the moon beneath your feet in this dark world. Well, it is a cold day here in Tennessee. I believe it was 19 degrees this morning, so I'm bundled up in this fuzzy sweater. I feel like a llama when I wear this sweater. But we're just trying to stay warm. And so we're going to be looking at another passage that will inform us and help shape our attitude and posture for the Christmas season. So we're looking at Matthew chapter 2. So I'm going to read this narrative and then I'll unpack it a little bit. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who is to be born, King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was distressed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all of the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, he asked where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler, one who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with the gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So I am titling this message that Satan could not stop Christmas. Satan could not stop Christmas. So I want to pull out some things about the Magi themselves before I move this on and looking at Herod and that. Let's observe some important things about the Magi. First, I want to observe that they are sincere. Their motives are sincere, their heart's sincere. They have seen this star in the east, definitely a divine invitation for them. And they accepted that divine invitation. And with sincerity, they come bearing gifts. And their posture just is infused with this heartfelt inquiry and a heartfelt response of faith. They responded to the invitation. An invitation of mystery. An invitation of wonder. They didn't really know where they were going. Like Abraham. Abraham wondered, he didn't know where he was going. They didn't know where they were going, but they were following the star. And it led them to Jesus. So there's such sincerity and proper response, we could add to that. But I'm blending those for a reason, because their pursuit and inquiring of this was with a posture of authenticity. And I think that's important. We have to be authentic before God. Number two, they were discerning. They had this dream not to return to Herod, and they responded to that. So they were discerning that there was danger, that they could have put the baby Jesus in a situation of danger. Now, of course, God could have worked in other ways to protect him, and he would have. I'm not calling that into question, but I'm looking at their discerning. And it is so important that Christians be discerning. Jesus did tell us to be as wise as serpents. He's called us to not be gullible, but to be discerning. And number three, I want to point out their humility. They come to Christ. They come bearing gifts. Their posture is one of being humble towards him. They bow down and worship. This isn't someone who's already on some throne bearing a crown. It's a baby. And they bowed before the baby, Jesus, and worshipped and paid him honor, not despising his infancy, but such humility. And there's a lot more that I could unpack with the Magi, but I think those three traits will set the stage for what I want to talk about authenticity, about discernment, and about a posture of humility. So let's look secondly at the person of Herod, because Herod became a vehicle for Satan to work through. He cooperated with Satan in order to be a tool for evil. Now, Herod was an Idumean. He was not a Jew by birth. His father was an Edomite, and his mother was an Arabic princess. So he was a Jew by religious order. Yet, we see him completely failing at authenticity. What a contrast between the Magi. He was a Jew in name only. He was a nominal Jew. So he did not measure up to what the law had prescribed for Judaism. He did at least help them with their temple and build their temple. Herod had a peculiar personality. He was very paranoid about a threat to his throne. So when we see here that it says they came and inquired about the one who was to be born king of the Jews, well, Herod's thinking, oh, well, I'm king of the Jews. And so he's threatened by any kind of retaliation or any kind of usurping of his throne. He's very safeguarding of his position as king. And we see this in history as well. So that he had the children, the male children 2 and under, murdered is in keeping with his historical record of violence for no good reason. So what we see in his past was he had his first wife executed, he had her grandfather executed, he had her mother executed, he had his brother-in-law executed, he had 3 of his sons executed. See, there was such a paranoia and a threat to his throne, that anyone who became a threat to him, he had executed. Augustus said, I would rather be Herod's pig than his son. And that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek because they were kosher. They didn't eat pigs. So it was safer to be his pig than to be his son. So he had a history of being paranoid and very protective of his throne. So here comes these Magi, where's the one to be born king of the Jews? Instantly he feels threatened. So we see him beginning to respond to that. So we see Herod as being a very prideful person, a very arrogant person, paranoid, and definitely love of power. He loved his position and his power. So we see in this narrative that Jesus is very controversial right off the bat. The birth of Jesus, the narrative is so full of controversy. We have those who come and worship, who are authentic and genuine and sincere, and then immediately we have an antagonistic. Someone who wants to stamp out Christ, stamp out the church before it even gets started. He's a tool in the hand of Satan. And he really becomes kind of while he's a historical figure, he becomes kind of a symbol of state government, of how oligarchical governments respond towards Christianity. So we see in him this typology, we could say, even though he was historical, of how states wield their power against Christianity. They don't feel threatened by Buddhism or some of these other religions. It's usually Christianity that's the threat, because Christianity is a threat to Satan. So state becomes state governments become a tool in the hand of Satan to try to squelch and suppress Christian faith. We saw this ourselves. Right in America, we don't really have outright persecution. Around the world, where there's a lot of persecution, Christians being martyred. We've recently had Nigeria, with my last report I heard was 50-something thousand. It may be more than that now, of Christians that have been martyred. We see North Korea. We see China. We see a lot of hostility around the world towards Christianity. But in America, we don't have persecution in that way, but we are seeing a different kind of persecution. We've seen censorship, where Christians and conservatives were being censored. We've seen people who prayed and actually at the boundaries at abortion clinics keep respecting those boundaries and still being imprisoned. So we've seen that under the last administration, and thankfully now we do have a president who is protective of Christianity and supportive of Christianity, and is running the government in a pro-Christian response, and that is welcoming. But we have had a rub in our culture against Christian faith. Recently in the news we've had where cities have banned the nativity scenes or any kind of religious symbols on government property. But what is so interesting is the way that they stance this. And I Googled some of this. I was wanting to see which cities were taking this posture this year. And when I Googled it, I got the weirdest response from AI, and I thought I'm going to share that with the public. AI, when I asked about the cities, it began to give me this whole breakdown on the First Amendment right and saying how some cities, and it acted like this was such a glorious thing, well, some cities have chosen to represent minority religions, like the Satanic Temple. Yes, that is what AI said. Like it was okay, or like it was a virtuous thing. Well, we're not going to respect Christianity, but you can set up a satanic symbol. I mean, so somehow it's okay to go with the minority group, because minority seems to be like a hot subject today. The Satanic Temple. Now, we cannot forget that I believe it was 2023, Iowa, at their state capital in Iowa, they set up a satanic display. It was absolutely disgusting. During Christmas. They set it up the first part of December. So we're seeing an outright attack against Christianity. And they'll say free speech. It's so funny. So the Satanic Temple can have free speech, but Christians can't pray in public, or, we can, but we get scolded, praying in school, and all these things become more controversial for Christians. Free speech. Free speech says, well, it's okay if somebody wants to, attack Jews publicly, have anti-Semitic marches, and yet they don't call them xenophobic. Yeah, but when I Googled all of this, it then went into talking about the First Amendment right and the Satanic Temple. It started talking about Christian nationalism. And it painted Christian nationalism as xenophobic and as Islamophobic, and called it the greatest threat to our democracy. I was floored that AI was saying. Of course, it's just picking up what's online. It even referred to Christian nationalists as Hitlers, mini Hitlers. It was absolutely absurd what it was saying. And so what I saw in this is this outright threat, this narrative that's attacking Christianity and patriotism. To say that. So you can be a Christian nationalist and you're called a xenophobic and Islamophobic, but yet you can go out in the street and have chants that are anti-Semitic and you're not xenophobic. It's one way for one group and one for another. It's so messed up. But we as Christians have got to maintain a posture of diligence, of steadfastness, of courage, of boldness, of leadership, of truth-telling. This is an assault on our country and on Christianity. But this rub has always been there. We talk about it a lot on this channel. So we see this rub against culture and this Jesus being a controversial figure as the birth narrative. It's not going to end. It's going to be this way all the way to the end. So we have to know how to fight. It's not enough for us to think we can't capitulate. That's not an option. We have to stay engaged. And that's what we're about on this channel. That we need to be equipped. We need to equip the next generation so that they will know how to be equipped and to engage in this warfare. This is spiritual warfare. There's a spiritual attack. There's a spiritual dimension behind the political forces and the cultural forces in this culture, in this world, we should say. So we have to know how to address these issues, these topics that come up. And capitulating is just not an option. So we see Christianity becoming less tolerant in the public face, in the public eye. And we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared that there's going to be these false narratives. Like free speech is acceptable for anti-Semitic rhetoric or for spewing some sort of hate against Christianity, but then it becomes not tolerable when we exercise our rights as believers. And so we have to be prepared for that. So what I would say is that we need to embrace the controversy. Because it's there. We have to embrace it. We have to accept that Jesus is controversial. Therefore, our Christian position is controversial. Therefore, we become controversial. So we have to embrace that controversy. Christianity is not about loving and accepting everything in society. Christian love is not accepting a society sliding into the sewer. That's not Christian love. Christian love is not turn your head around and not notice the slide into the sewer. No, Christian love is truth-telling. Freedom of speech should not condone anti-Semitic marches on college campuses and pro-gay marches. Christian love is not flying the rainbow flag in your church. That's not what Christian love is. Now, let me say this when I said that about free speech should not be, should not be about anti-Semitic marches. At the same time, we do need to be careful not to fall into the thing that Europe has fallen into with this, what they have a hate law. So if you have expressed any kind of what they consider hate on your social media, they will arrest you in the UK. There was one person arrested because they spoke out on their social media about Europe's open border policy. Another one spoke out something about anti-Semitism, and they got arrested. Yet the anti-Semitics got to espouse whatever they wanted to espouse, So we've got to be careful not to fall into that trap of saying, hey, we need to embrace hate speech laws. No, the hate speech is just going to reveal who they are. It's exposing themselves, so we know. It's embracing that controversy. And that's what we have to do, is embrace that controversy. Christian love is not flying the rainbow flag in your church. It's truth-telling. Christian love is protecting our children from inappropriate literature. It is protecting women's sports, protecting the sanctity of marriage, protecting the child in the womb. That's Christian love. So, no time to stick your head in the sand. We have to be proactive. We have to become discerning and know the manipulation of the enemy. We need to know our enemy. We need to know the tactics, the deceitfulness, the smoke screens that they put out, and see through those and discern. Herod said, come back and report to me so that I too may go and worship him. He didn't want to worship him, he wanted to kill him. Yeah, I just finished reading a couple weeks ago, The Naked Communist. It was written by an FBI agent in the 50s. I think it's on like its 8th edition now. And they called it The Naked Communist because when they were trying to figure out a title, his friend said, what you've done, you've stripped communism. You've exposed it for what it is. So they named it Naked Communism. And as I read it, it went through some of the history with some of our leaders. And it began to show time and time and time again how so many of our leaders capitulated and would say, oh, they're not that bad. The communists aren't that bad. And they would capitulate. They were not discerning. They were not being wise as serpents. And we have to be wise as serpents. Some want to say, they're not really a group of hate. Yes, they are. When they say that they hate America, they do. When they say they want to destroy America, they really do. So we have to be wise and discerning. We have to stop capitulating. Who cares if someone calls you a name? It's a name. Don't fall for that. You don't want to be called a racist. You don't want to be called a misogynist. Or you don't want to be called, whatever. Who cares? Be genuine. Be authentic. I want to be called an authentic Christian. A bold Christian. A courageous Christian. I want to be known for truth-telling. Not capitulating. We have a spiritual force that is behind all of what we see taking place in the world. And it's our duty. Our duty as Christians is to stand up for the kingdom of God and to preserve society, to influence culture, to move us in a way towards faith, not away from it. We can't capitulate, not an option. The worldview of society is not informed by Christian teachings. So it's our duty to inform them, to inform society in order to have a peaceful society, a functioning society, a normal society, a society that has absolutes of morals. Yeah. We are equipped for spiritual discernment. The worldviews of others is not like ours. Marxists and communists do not hold the same worldview. Muslims do not hold the same worldview. Buddhists do not hold the same worldview. There's a different worldview that they have. And they are not hiding their agenda. The communists and even the Muslims, they're not hiding their agenda. So Christians want to appear oftentimes as being nice and kind, but we're called to be wise. We're called to be discerning. We're called to protect the sacred. We have to remember, Jesus was not always nice. Jesus was not always polite. He wasn't always kind. He stood up. Woe to you, Pharisees, you whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. Yeah. He rubbed against culture. He didn't capitulate to it. And that's our job. That's our duty. So I want to encourage you to embrace the rub. Embrace the controversy, that Jesus is controversial, that Christianity is controversial. Embrace that. You're going to experience the ramifications of taking your position, standing for Christ in this world. That's just how it is. So we're going to embrace that. And as we embrace that, we're going to go into the season, into this Christmas season, we're going to rejoice in this season. Many all over the world are celebrating Christmas. What a marvelous time. It's the one time when we see people who don't even believe in Christ, atheists, outright celebrate Christianity. It's almost hilarious. You just can't even write this. Everybody wants to join in on the traditions that we have formed with our faith. And that is a wonderful thing because that grants opportunity. They're engaged. They don't even understand what they're engaged in. They just like the whole celebration. And it grants us an opportunity. Like that shining star that the Magi saw and they followed. We too, this season, can be that shining star in the darkness that points people to Christ. Reminding them that all your gift exchanging, all of this celebration of feasting of food around our table is all about Jesus. All of the lights decorated everywhere that you're marveling in, all of the Christmas trees, it's all about Jesus. In fact, all of the colors of the season point back to Jesus. Yeah, blue, what we decorate our trees with and stuff. Blue speaks of His heavenly origin. White speaks of His purity. Silver speaks of atonement. Gold speaks of deity. Red speaks of the blood. Purple speaks of royalty. I'm trying to think of the other ornaments. Green speaks of God as creator of the earth. So all of the ornament colors and all of the light speaks of Jesus as the light of the world. We light up our houses. We light up the trees. And that's our worldview. That is our tradition that we've established. And the world celebrates. And it just grants us an opportunity to be that shining star pointing them to Christ. So, I pray you have a wonderful Christmas and that you are able to be that shining star. I know sometimes there's people we have to, maybe you've got some family members that are a little rowdy, a little rough around the edges, and you might have to do a little extra praying as they come to your home or you go to their home. But you just say that extra prayer and put on that smile and be that pointing star. Don't capitulate. Don't do it. But speak truth in love. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining me. I pray that you like and help me build this channel. Share this video. Mention it to one of your friends. If you've seen this video, mention it to somebody you go to church with or something. And help me build this. And join me on Facebook You know, go to the Eagle and the Dove podcast on Facebook and like that. I put some extra stuff up there. I post scriptures. I post some quotes from different people. Some from Christian history and different things. And it's a way for us to connect. God bless. Have a wonderful day.